the Voodoo and Afro-Caribbean traditions. If the dreaming braids lure to country, and shamans carry repackaged between worlds, Afro-Caribbean Voodoo grabbed ancestral West Central African cosmologies onto Caribbean soil. The dead remain potent, the spirits or thelwa are negotiable partners, and practiced hands colonial rupture into continuing communal resilience. Gates and thresholds, Ginen or Guinea, the homeland of spirits and the watery scene. Ginen, sometimes spoken as Guinea, is a homeland of the spirits and a sea of water where the living and the dead exchange letters. It is at once a remembered Africa, an underwater world beneath rivers and the sea, and an immanent realm of ancestral presence. The language that names it tells you immediately that you are dealing with geography that behaves like a memory. Thresholds here wear practical clothing, the peristyle, the temple floor, and its potomitan, the central pillar that holds the roof and the world together. Literal doors. Circular space dance and the house becomes an opening. Cemetery edges and riverbanks are no less sacred. In some rites, the living literally draws spirit out of the watery place and into an object or household service. A year and a day choreography transforms absence into presence. Think of it as domestic diplomacy with a splash. At the center of this exchange is the Ponanj, the large good angel, the part of a person that holds memory, personality, and potency. It can linger in Ginen, travel, be called back, or be lodged into a gourbi, a clay jar that preserves a relative's presence so the family may console and be guided. And that presence is not abstract. It is a practical resource and a social responsibility. Neglect the right and the household complains in the most domestic of ways. Illness, misfortune, sleepless nights. The technical aperture between worlds is a craftsman's kit, very drawn on dirt like tiny mats, offerings of food and drink, much more, set out with exactness, drums that insists a body keep time, and the spectacular moment of procession when the thelwa step in and everyone agrees to be charmed. These are not theatrical stunts, they are communicative acts, signatures on the page, if you will, that open and stabilize a line to spirits. The thelwa come because they are summoned, and they answer in taste, movement, and sometimes sing-song reprimed. So, picture the peristyle at dusk, the potomitan wrapped with glove and offering, velvet traced and white on packed earth, and dancers moving in a widening spiral while drums speak the names of families. A priest or priestess holds a thelwa by lineage and deeds. For a moment, the room rearranges itself, speech tilts into another tongue, a torso moves with someone else's priorities, and the family watches their past return and trim its nails. There is tenderness in the choreography and a strict etiquette. Spirit aren't casual guests, they require welcome, table manners, and the occasional presence. So, the social logic is plain. Households draw spirits into service, to advise, to protect, to ask favors. And, in return, they must maintain the relationship, offerings, songs, and name observances. A cultivated houses, a core bonage, becomes a household library, an interlocutor you feed and consult. The ritual economy is therefore both effective and pragmatic. Memory is preserved, advice is available, and obligations are recorded in the language of offerings. Transit and Psychopomps, possession, procession, and thelwa who carry. If thresholds are doors, possession is the moment the house hands over the speaking stick. In Voodoo, the thelwa do not merely whisper from the wings, they step forward, take the floor, and, if the choreography is right, address the living directly through a human mouth. This is not collapse into madness, but a negotiated transfer of agency. The thelwa mounts a body, speaks through it, laughs the rum, and occasionally offers advice so blunt it would make a tax collector blush. Now, possession is the clearest kind of access. When a thelwa mounts, something recognizably other animates the practitioner. Posture changes, language shift, appetites alter, and preferences, often culinary, are announced with the sincerity of someone who has just been offered a canapé. The community treats this as encounter rather than eclipse. The mounted person is a vehicle, a channel authorized by ritual. And the words that come through are treated as communication with a moral and practical balance. In short, it is a conversation, not a takeover. And that conversation is choreographed. Ungan and Mambo, priests and priestesses, are the producers and stage managers. They call the thelwa, lay out offerings, name duties, and hold the perimeter. The drums know the scripts. Tamboye, seasoned drummers, play the rhythms that summon particular families of spirits. Another beat invites a cool ancestral presence, while a peto rhythm opens the way for hotter, more volatile forces. The joys of rhythm is not decorative. It is the thelwa's preferred ringtone. Get the beat wrong and you risk inviting a wrong guest, or at best, a confused cousin who insists on removing everyone's shoes. Beyond the rhythm, there are technicians aplenty, singers who intone names and histories, offertory attendants who arrange food and drink with exacting taste, and couple, or elders, who watch for signs that the thelwa has entered or left. And these roles matter because possession must be contained and time-limited. The priest and the musician shepherd the spirit in, making encounter legible and shepherd it out again, ensuring the body returns to its ordinary life with minimal paperwork. And there is an etiquette. You see, the thelwa must be fed, welcomed, and sent away with thanks, not sent packing with a brusque thumbs down. Procession and public labor are extensions of possession. In the streets, in a cour, or during seasonal festivals, mounted devotees process, sometimes bearing the thelwa's marks on their skin, sometimes dancing with the awkward dignity of someone who has been asked to wear someone else's head. And these processions are practical as much as ecstatic. They reinsert the spirit into communal life, reaffirming obligations and distributing blessings or occasional curses. With theatrical clarity, a public procession is less a spectacle than a communal appointment. Everyone who attends becomes witness and guarantor of the spirit's world. And their words. Seasonal rites and generic technologies translate the newly dead into available ancestors. The year and a day rites, the preparation and placement of the bonage into holy, sacred vessels, and the careful feeding and tending of those vessels are acts of conversion, and the enamel of personal potency becomes a household resource. Practically, this means families put the dead to work, advice, protection, the old intervention of love and money matters, provided the household keeps the account books of offerings and attention. A well-kept copy is a family's ledger. A neglected one is, unsurprisingly, a source of complaint. Possession is also decisively communicative. The lure may scold, instruct, heal, settle disputes, or demand justice, because the spirits are often linked to particular corners: farm work, healing, justice, love. The speech has a clear remit. An advice-giving lure may instruct a farmer where to plant cassava. A justice-minded lure may call for reparation in a domestic revel. The words that come through are not metaphysical platitudes, but operational directives. Do this and give that, stop doing that. Their efficacy is tested in the day-to-day, crops, reconciliations, healings. If the spirit prescribes a cure and works, faith and authority reinforce each other. There are constraints and safeguards. Possession is ritualized to prevent harm. Priests control the temple, monitor the mount a person's state, and maintain boundaries, literal and symbolic. Offerings, songs, and proper naming ensure that the spirit's entry is consensual and that its departure will be clean. Like any good host, the community ensures the guest has left before the plates are cleared. The system has checks, obligations to lure, and to ancestors are social technologies that keep relations accountable. If a household fails in its duties, the consequences are practical and immediate: illness, restless nights, or spirit sulk, which is a very bad look at family gatherings. Finally, possession is a form of collective knowledge-making to lure speech encodes history, social memory, and norms. When a spirit reprimands a family for neglect, it reminds them of obligations written into story and obligation. When a spirit tells a healer the secret of a cure, it passes on ecological knowledge embedded in ritual practice. Possession is therefore not merely ecstatic theater. It is a mechanism for governance, memory, and practical instruction, spoken through the mouth of someone who happens, for a while, to be varying someone else's priorities. So, in short, the lure mount, the priests steer, the drummers call the tune, and the community keeps the books. Possession opens a line of direct speech between worlds that is choreographed, accountable, and deeply useful. The spirits speak plainly, the living act on that speech, and the whole enterprise, unlikely as it might seem to an outsider, runs like a remarkably old-fashioned but effective piece of public administration. A council, a court, and occasionally a dining club, all rolled into one. Court and Inhabitants, Lua, Guede, Ancestors, and the House of Shades. The House of the Lua is delightfully cluttered. Not a courtroom with a single judge, but a polycentric parlor where dozens of specialists answer different kinds of trouble. Rada, Petro, Guede, and other Nankon form overlapping families of spirits, and each has its own temperament, jurisdiction, and preferred refreshments. Some preside over fertility, others keep a watch over work and justice, and a discreet set manage the geography of death itself. Rada Lua are the family you invite when you want steady counsel, cool, ancestral, or described as ondose or sweet-tempered, and rooted in West African lineages. Heterolua contrasts them as hotter, sharper, and born of the New World's Creole pressures. Useful where blunt force is required. Then there are the Guede, the deadly savvy kin whose humor is as much a social lubricant as it is a theological stance. These families are not moral caricatures, but working tendencies within a living pantheon. At the center of the death work stands the Guede clan, whose public face is Baron Samedi, top hat, rum, cigarette, and a taste for body repartee. Baron Samedi and his kin perform the messy diplomacy of burial graveyard and passage. They guard crossroads, dig metaphysical graves, and, on occasion, refuse to let someone die until their accounts are settled. They are psychopomps with a sense of timing and a penchant for gallows humor. To offend them is to invite consequences delivered with theatrical relish. Alongside the high-profile lure, household ancestors do the quiet, domestic work. The Guobonanch, the life force or large good angel of a person, can be lodged into a govi or sacred container, thereby converting a relative into an ongoing, serviceable presence for advice, protection, or the occasional marital intervention. These house ancestors are not merely sentimental relics. They are active agents in household life, fed and consulted according to painstaking etiquette. They collect the govi and expect practical complaints, illness, misfortune, and a sharp decline in useful counsel. Ceremonially, the court's workings are theatrical and highly local. Another itar feels cool and familiar. A petrospace can smell of gunpowder and urgency. A Guede display will mix shovels with party favors. Procession, songs, offerings, and the social recognition of a mounted devotee constitute the court's testimony. The community listens, validates, and enacts on the spirit's words. Authority here is performed and witnessed. The voice of a lure matters because the people present have the competence to hear, translate, and make the spirit's advice consequential. So, the moral of the house is practical. Spiritual specialists are specialists because they do things that change daily life. They guard the dead, bless the living, arbitrate disputes, and keep the ledger of obligations balanced. The court is convivial, occasionally rude, and endlessly busy. It reminds everyone that the sacred and the social are braided together, and that in a well-run house of shades you get counsel, comedy, and the occasional curse, all on the same evening's menu. Judgment, reward, and cultural function, ancestral return, social remedy, and political solidarity. Voodoo's verdicts, hands-on and communal, when harm appears, sickness, crop failure, a household feud, priests and practitioners set about diagnosing cause, spirit intrusion, a curse, or a moral breach, and prescribing remedies that are meant to work in the world as well as the spirit. The prescription is concrete: offerings, sacrifices, public apologies, reparative acts, and named rights that reassert obligations. The proof of departing is social and practical. Reconcile families, reap harvest, or the calming of a household, not a theological sentence delivered from on high. Rituals to the adjudicating, possession, divination, and communal rites surface who or what has been offended. The lural ancestors speak through embodied agents, and their directiveness become reparative law, give offerings, rebuild offense, make a public apology, or redirect resources to repair an injury. These acts reweigh social bonds by making breaches visible and then prescribing visible acts of repair, so that the community can witness the remedy and the obligations are recorded in practice, rather than only in talk. Ancestors and thelwa are the working judiciary and the advisory council rolled into one. Housed ancestors, the quo bonange placed in the Guede, and a more public lure intervene in daily life, blessing fields, warning of danger, or demanding restitution. So, ongoing offerings, manjemo, and ritual participation are not mere piety but civic maintenance. A well-kept relationship with the spirit is a household insurance. Attend to it when counsel, protection, and practical intervention follow. Neglect it and the house complains in very tangible ways. Voodoo social remedies over political tools. Historically and today, Voodoo has functioned as a language of solidarity and resistance, a means to mobilize, sustain moral, and to redistribute assistance when formal structures fail. From its legendary place in Haiti's evolutionary memory to contemporary moments when communities turn to lure and ritual for protection amid violence, Voodoo operates as civic clue as much as theology. It organizes mutual aid, makes claims public, and articulates communal needs in ritual form. The system is accountable because outcomes are observable. If a prescribed rite brings a family back together, if a planting season improves after offerings and counsel, the ritual is validated. Authority accrues to those who can propose acts that demonstrably change material conditions. A pragmatic feedback loop, ritual prescription followed by communal monitoring of results, is where voodoo specialists hold social influence. Their judgments are judged by what happens next. And finally, voodoo's civic functions stretch into everyday welfare. Rites and networks channel resources in times of crisis, shrines become hubs of support, and ritual frames provide a way to name grievances and arrange reparations. In crisis, people often turn to what works: collective vigil, mutual aid organized through core networks, and spiritual counsel that doubles as practical coordination. The religion's procedures are thus knit more repair to material life, making voodoo both therapy and a remarkably efficient, if ancient form of local governance.